Hello, everyone, and what do we have on tap for you today? Well, folks, it's the Twitter files. That's right, folks, part 4. And this is from what Michael Schellenberger dropped last night, part 4 of the Twitter files. And folks, just like in the X-Files where they said somewhere out there someone has to know, well, guess what, folks? We're getting to know what a lot of people didn't know. And it's dropping, and Elon Musk is doing this bit by bit, piece by piece. He's doing this absolutely the way it should be done because there's so much information out here, folks. There's just so much information that if he did this document dump right away, it'd just be overwhelming. So to come in small little parts and sectors, that's exactly the way it should be, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. And before we get to that, just want to let you know you were watching the Dr. Nasir Sheikh Show. I'm your guest host for today. My name is Dr. Sheikh. And you know what? If you haven't done so already, it's your first time here, subscribe to this channel. We'd really appreciate it. And hit that notification bell so you get our content in the future. You know, share and like this. You know how the algorithm works. So what are we talking about? Folks, it was the leftist executives. These were the people at the highest levels of Twitter that said that they weren't doing anything to stifle free speech. They weren't doing anything to shadow ban anybody. They weren't taking conservatives off the platform. It was all just in our heads. It was a crock of crap, and we all know it, right? So these, not only did they twisted rules, they fabricated rules, folks. They fabricated them to blacklist Donald Trump and a bunch of other conservatives as well. So let's go through this bit by bit with Michael Schellenberger, and as he talked about here. In a recently published thread, he outlined the fourth release detailing the internal workings at Twitter and the conversations that the executives had ahead of banning President Trump. So here's what we're talking about. Pressure's building. Twitter executives they have got to build a case for a permanent ban. So he states that the following events at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, there was an immense pressure to ban former President Trump. Many were claiming they need to ban Trump for safety reasons. Now, at this time, he goes on to say that at that time, CEO Jack Dorsey was on vacation. So he just seemed to delegate his decision-making to other top executives. Who were they? Well, one was the global head of trust and safety, Joel Roth, who just absolutely despises President Trump. He's a true leftist, hates this country, doesn't like America, doesn't like anything about freedom. If he could, he'd squash your First Amendment, your Second Amendment, every right that you have. He'd be willing to take it away just like that. Next, you've got Vijaya Gadde. She's the attorney. She's the platform censorship queen. And the thing with Vijaya Gadde, these people left India to come to the United States of America to seek fame and fortune. Well, they got their fame and fortune. They just don't want you to have your fame. They don't want you to have your fortune unless your ideas gel or meld with theirs. In other words, does your diversity of opinion, does your diversity of thought, does it match their diversity of opinion, their diversity of thought? Think about that, folks. Michael Schellenberger goes on to write that after the events of January 6th, the internal and external pressure on Twitter CEO Jack rose. Look who was there. Michelle Obama. Well, whoop-de freaking do. How'd you know about that? Tech journalist Kara Swisher. And I guess that's a high-tech venture capitalist Chris Sacca and many others publicly call on Twitter to permanently ban Trump. Look what they talk about. Here's a little brief. It says, if you work at those companies, it's on you too. Shut it down. And here's something basically from somebody here saying, ban Trump. All right? Mike Schellenberger continues with this thread. Dorsey was on vacation in the French Polynesia that week, but he phoned into meetings, but he delegated much of the handling we talked about to Joel and Vijaya. If we go on forward, it says now, at that time, on January 7th, Dorsey emailed employees saying the platform must remain consistent in its policies, and he basically felt that it should have some type of policy that allow users to return to the platform following temporary bans. Jack Dorsey never wanted permanent bans. Now, Roth at that time assured an employee that people who care about this, meaning himself and all those other leftist, socialist, Marxists that work at Twitter, they aren't happy where we are. In other words, Roth basically here is implying that even he doesn't like Dorsey's implicit statement here that in terms of the platform must remain consistent in its policies. Already Yoel's brain and head is spinning. What can we do? How can we get rid of these people? How can we get rid of Trump along with Jay Agati? So Roth later, there was down the line, Jack approved some type of I guess it was a policy that there would be an offender for civic integrity. So in other words, he's basically saying it would allow Twitter to create a system where 5 violations of the rules would result in permanent suspension. In other words, you'd have to go through 5 scenarios. And this is what he's talking about here. And look at this. He says, Jack's emails have been fine. This is from Yoel Roth. But ultimately, I think people want to hear from Vijay or Dell or someone closer to specifics of this who can reassure them that the people who care about this are thinking deeply. We're so deep in thought. And Jack's out in French Polynesia. He doesn't know what the heck's going on. But Vijay and we're deep, deep, deep in thought. And you know what? We're just not happy with where we are. A few engineers have reached out to me directly about it, and I'm chatting with them. But it's so clear that they just want to know that someone, me, Vijaya, is doing something about this. And it's not that we're ignoring the issues here. Now, Michael Schellenberg continues saying that in terms of where Jack just approved a repeat offender for civic integrity, this new approach would create a system with 5 violations. Strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, strike 4, and strike 5. You're out of there, boy. That's what's going to happen. That would result in a permanent suspension. So what are they? Well, first is a label-only strike. Number 2, a label-only strike. Number 3, a labor plus a 12-hour timeout. Oh, you've been a bad boy. Timeout for you. Finally, a label and a 7-day timeout strike. Ooh, and then number 5, a permanent suspensione. That's what it was. Now, colleagues continued to ask Roth about the incitement to violence. And then finally, on the 8th of January, Twitter announced a permanent ban due to the risk of further incitement of violence. Now, the ban was based on how Trump's tweets are being received and interpreted. So now the thought police are trying to police our thought, our interpretations, right? But back in 2019, Schellenberger notes that Twitter stated it did not attempt to determine all potential interpretations of the content or its intent. In other words, Twitter was saying back in 2019, we may police the thought when you put it down in black and white, but we're not going to police the thought or the interpretation once somebody takes it off of the black and white and reads it themselves. So that's where Twitter was basically falling down on, which they're a private company, a public, they can do what they want, all right? And so, again, the query comes, incitement of violence heavily foreshadows what will happen the following day. As we know, January 8th, there it is, a permanent ban. Now, just like we talked about, the ban is based specifically on how Trump's tweets are being received and interpreted. So we went over that. Now, here's another discussion they had. Roth then asked a colleague to add Stop the Steal and Kraken to a blacklist of terms to be unamplified. What's unamplified, folks? That's leftist code for what? Shadow banning. Now, a colleague objects, stating that if you do this, you would de-amplify counter speech that validate the 2020 election results. In other words, Stop, Steal, and Kraken, people were using it for both ways. They were talking in terms of for the election, against the election, depending on what side of the political spectrum you fell on. So this colleague says, well, if we start doing that, guess what? There's a lot of people on the left, liberals, leftists, Democrats, we're going to be countering their speech, de-amplifying it, shadow banning it. We can't have that happen. So what do you do to that? So they go on to say, now here, remember the daylight separating the Q and the stop the steal stuff is now effectively zero, they talk about? Kraken for sure, someone goes on to say, if it's not already there. And he goes, I'm too worried about the risk of de-amplifying counter speech with stop the steal. Now, so they said, if you just did a quick search of the top stop the steal tweets and their counter speech, but guess what? They came up with an unbelievably great solution. Somebody said, just de-amplify the accounts with stop the steal and name profile, because that's what was going on, right? A lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans, independents, whoever you were, if you were voting for Trump, then you were putting this into your name, into your profile, and it was very easy for Twitter to get their engineers to go in and put this in there, because now, most of the time, a Democratic person, a leftist, a liberal, a progressive, a moderate, they're probably not going to have, Kraken or Stop the Steal in their name profile. And they said those would not be affiliated with counter speech. And that's how they shadow ban us, folks. They pick out the specific words in our bio, in wherever it is within our tweet platform. And they can get those, put them into an algorithm, and then do whatever they want with that. Now, it does say that the latest Twitter files appear to show a general attempt by Roth and other Twitter employees. Now they have to justify the banning of Trump, and they have to attempt to figure out how the current policy could be applied in a way that would explain the permanent suspension. And so the sales executive asks, are we dropping the public interest policy? 6 hours later, in this specific case, yes, we're changing our public interest approach for this account. Now, what did that all mean before that? Before, in the past, they had an exemption, they exempted policy violation from a world leader due to the public interest value. Get this here, folks. They had a policy before that it would be an exemption if you were a world leader. And what you had was public interest value. And he says, are we dropping the public interest now? And any new violation could be a trigger. For me to understand, again, we'll check with comms regarding what we can or cannot share publicly. In other words, what can we hide and what can we put out there? Then Roth replies, apologies for the slow reply. I've been back to back all day today. Oh, he's been a busy little boy. In this specific case, we're changing our public interest approach. Any violation would result in suspension. We aren't completely getting rid of the public interest approach, though we do have work planned on revisions in H1 2021. Now, obviously, Schellenberg goes on to say, referring to Twitter's policy of public interest exceptions, we talked about that, a discussion of a matter of public concern. Well, now Schellenberger ends this thread that Facebook's suspension of former President Trump and its willingness to ignore its own rules put the final nail in the coffin for Trump's return to Twitter. So basically what happened was that, we saw this here, Facebook had its own rule book. That's all they do. And this is a reminder again of how the power of the platform, of these platforms have over online speech and the inconsistency. If they want to use it, they do. If they don't want to use it, they don't. It's up to them. If they like you, they won't use it against you. If they don't like you, they will use it against you to go after you. And it basically said that Facebook's suspension of Trump put Twitter into an awkward position. I don't know why these guys should be thinking themselves, but no, they decided Facebook did it. Well, now we got to do it. And anyways, it goes on to say that, Twitter said they'll ramp up to find a pretext on which to ban him as well. Now, there's going to be Twitter files number 5 and 6 and 7 and as many as Elon Musk needs. The next ones, I guess, are coming from Barry Weiss. And when those things come out, folks, we will certainly bring them to you. But I hope you enjoyed this episode here of the Twitter Files Part 4. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Sheikh Show. I was your guest host today. My name is Dr. Sheikh. And I'll leave you with this final thought, folks. When you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. We'll see you again next time, folks. Take care and stay safe.